Next presentation is from Ricardo Eiris, and the title of the paper is Eiris collaborates online with user virtual site visits using 360-degree panoramas and virtual humans. So please, you can share your screen. Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
Okay. Yeah, of course, I can see it.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Ricardo. I'm an assistant professor at the Michigan Technological University. This project was a collaboration with Masoud Ghazari from the University of Florida. And as our introducer talked to us about, I'm going to be talking about the iVisit Collaborate online multi-user virtual site visits using 360-degree panoramas and virtual humans. So in construction programs, we have multiple people that have to come together and work in a spatial temporal context. So that includes time, how the project develops across time, how those people interact with each other, and the different locations that happen within that construction site. Within those spatial temporal contexts and those interactions between people, it is actually quite challenging for us to figure out when students need to go in and actually observe those interactions in those locations and at those different times. So it's very challenging for us as instructors to figure out when does that need to happen, who should be responsible to take those students there, how are they going to have access to those locations. A lot of the times those locations are not easily accessible for us to provide site visits or field trips to the students to go and learn about those different aspects of the construction project. There are dangerous situations in those construction sites. What happens if something goes wrong, either going to the job site or at the job site? Construction, as our previous presentations talked about, it's a very dangerous industry. So it is a real possibility that while we take our students to those site visits, something can happen. Not only that, but it's also expensive. A lot of our universities are far away from metropolitan areas. So it's difficult for us to be able to reach those construction locations easily and cheaply. Sometimes it takes over an hour to just drive to a location, and then that has an impact with the curriculum of the students. They have other classes to attend to. They have personal responsibilities to attend to as well. And then there's also a time dependency that it's difficult. On day one, when it's summer, they might be doing concrete pour. But then on day 10, that concrete pour is gone and you can no longer see it. And as you transition, for instance, if you have 4 seasons where you're at, in the winter, sometimes there's no construction. So it's very difficult for you to be able to show them a construction site and be able to demonstrate the concepts that you're talking about in class. Additionally, the way the learning happens is actually quite challenging. How are you setting learning objectives for those site visits? Are you making sure that your students are engaged during those field trips? Do you provide them situated opportunities to do practice while they're on those job sites? Most of the time, what happens is that we take the students, they take a look around, they ask a few questions from the tour guide, which is typically somebody from a company that is very willing to help us, and it ends. There's no opportunities for us to practice as they are in there. And in addition to that, I think everybody is aware of that, and that's why we are right now online, is that COVID happened. So a lot of those field trips, those site visits were canceled and they are no longer at offer or they're very limited. Thankfully, that's changing slowly, but that's the case in a lot of places still. So the objective of this project was to create iVisit, which was an interactive setting where we could provide that spatial temporal context to the students in the classroom that it's absolutely true to reality using those 360 panoramas and interactions so that they can practice problem solving and they can practice communication in those environments in a controlled, replicable, very easy, cost-effective type of interaction that in there using virtual reality, they can actually utilize within the classroom. So in order for us to achieve that, we created a case study. We took a specific class, and that class is typically taught in the classroom, and then there are associated field trips that we take the students in there. In this case was a class at the University of Florida, and in that class, they cover construction techniques. They typically cover wood construction, casting place concrete, steel erection, and masonry construction. Those are the 4 materials mainly driven. And 2 of those were selected for this case study: wood construction, masonry construction, which are very common in the United States. And within the different topic areas that they cover, we specifically selected the materials usage because that is very visually observable in the construction site. Based on that, we created specific learning objectives based on the Bloom taxonomy. At the remember level, we looked at materials and how those material properties for both the masonry and the wood were reflected on that construction side. We developed specific learning objectives at the understand level into specifically the assembly, how those constructive techniques allows you to assemble those materials into a building. And then we provided them with an apply opportunity, a practice opportunity within our digital setting for the students to be able to utilize that understanding and that remember and put it into practice. We conducted interviews, we looked at the materials in class and the book, and we created two learning modules in our virtual reality setting where the students would be able to utilize those virtual reality settings and then do the assessment in also virtual reality. The module looks something like this, where the students will be able to go through waypoints, and in each of those points, they would have a virtual human that would accompany them similarly to a tour guide, and they would have augmented information on top of those 360 images, so they can learn additionally the different aspects of what they're seeing in that 360 image, accompanied by the description of that virtual human that was explaining the contents in there. In order for us to be able to distribute this as a collaborative experience, we had the students to be able to do that in pairs. So you can see right there on the corner, on the top right corner, that we had students camera that they could share their screen as they go through the virtual field trip. On the left is the actual virtual filter as it occurred. And on the right, it was a problem solving activity where they would have to communicate with each other to describe what they're seeing in the environment based on what the virtual human described. And they would have to solve a problem in the construction site. For us to evaluate this particular experiment and see how much the students learn and what are the factors that affect that learning, the first thing that we did is a knowledge retention quiz. A typical quiz that you would have in the class that asks them about how did they capture that, did they observe that information in the construction site and see how much they did learn. So we asked a paper quiz after they completed the virtual experience. We also asked the spatial visualization test. So we utilized the mental rotation to understand if the way that they were able to understand the 3 dimensions within those pictures had any issues with the knowledge retention and the way that they learned. We actually asked them about their teamwork experience and if they were comfortable working in teams within that virtual environment. And also we asked them about their attitudes with respect to the system. We looked at descriptively what were the results of these metrics, and we also looked at the correlation between the different variables. In this particular study it was a pilot study, a case study where we had 26 participants. So that means that we had 14 dyads of pair students. Their average age was 21 years old. Most of them were males, as it's very typical in construction programs. Most of them had no experience or less than 6 months of experience. So that means that they were novices doing this type of activities in a situated context in the construction site. They were low to medium familiarity with virtual reality, the same with 360 panoramas. So they have experienced it before, but they were not really familiar and they didn't use it on a daily basis. However, they did rate high to medium in familiarity with construction materials, particularly mason and wood, and with construction techniques as well, particularly mason and wood as well. So they were pretty confident that what they have learned in class actually helped them to understand the construction site. Now, in terms of our results, what we looked at was that our spatial visualization score, the way that they did those mental rotations, their average score was 41%. That was not very high, and that was skewed by the way that the dyads, that's an average score between the 2 participants, so that would show a single spatial visualization score per dyad to see how it contributed there. And then we looked at the knowledge scores, and their percentage was about 59%. We looked at a correlation because the objective of having the spatial visualization score with respect to the knowledge score was to see if there was any correlation if the students that would have higher spatial visualization scores would have better knowledge retention because they would be able to better understand that 3D space. And we didn't find any correlations. So that's really interesting. We also looked at the teamwork experience and their attitudes. And overall for the teamwork, they provided a score of 6 across all the different variables. That means that they were pretty comfortable with talking in teams within that virtual space, and the same thing for attitudes. They had a score level of 6 from 7, so they were pretty satisfied with the system. In conclusion, what we found is that the iVisit platform was very positively perceived by the students. We had a high variability of spatial visualization scores, and an average score was about 60%, 59% for knowledge score, and we didn't find any correlations between those two variables. In the future, what we want to find out is that if there is any trade-offs between traditional methods and how this compares to our virtual platform. Do they perform better? Do they perform worse with respect to traditional classroom learning? Also, if there's any scaffolding strategies that can help the students to learn better and how we can improve those self-learning skills. We actually did a more comprehensive analysis, and we learned some lessons with respect to how these different interactions happen. But that's for a bigger paper. We couldn't explain it within the time limit. So because of that, if you have questions about that, I'm more than happy with the quantitative analysis, and that's published in this paper over here. Thank you for taking the time to be here, and I just wanted to open up to any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Ricardo, for your very good and clear presentation. So is there any question? I'm checking the chat. No question in the chat. Okay. Any question from the auditorium?
No, we don't have questions.
Okay. So I think I can check again, but no question. I think that we go ahead. Okay. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for your good presentation.